This is Stephanie at Hightower Stitching with today's video, part 3 of Stitch As You Go projects. This is the project that I'm working on now that includes using up some of that batting that I have and using up small pieces of fabric. And this is actually part 1 and 2 has morphed into part 3. So let's use up some more long strips of batting and some pieces of fabric. In the past, I had done some paper piecing using adding machine tape or paper and strips of fabric that were left over from other projects. So I have several yards of that hanging in the closet on a hanger. And I thought, okay, I got a strips quilt, I got some more strips of batting. I might just try this again. So I pulled off some of those pieces of fabric that I had sewn together in that paper piecing, and I pulled out some more of the batting out of the box. Now the thing about this quilt is that the size of my strips are already set because I used 3-inch machine tape, and then I had an old roll of 2 1/4, and that became my other strip, so I didn't have to make all the strips the same width. When I found out you cut and you cut on the batting, and that's pretty good, and then you get bored with it and you keep going with your project, because I was doing it as I went. And then when I'd take a break, I'd go cut some more pieces. Well, now what I'm going to do with these, because I'm going to keep going with this project, is I'm going to sew them together on the ends with a nice zigzag stitch, and then I'll just have to cut the piece where I want it. And then I want to veer off here for a minute, because I thought of some other things that I could have used or could use to make a strip quilt like we've been talking about. And I had some strips left from another quilt, and I said, this might be a great way, because then I could make the strips the width that I wanted to. And so if you look at these, one of the things that I learned on a video was that when you're doing the strips, when you sew 2 strips together going one way, when you get ready to go back the other way, then add that strip on and sew the other way. And it sort of keeps it from getting wonky. That's my word for the month. When you finish and press it. So that's one idea for making those center strips. And then I thought, another thing that's already pre-cut are your charm squares. And the fabrics, lots of times you come in sets and you've already got those, but it wouldn't matter because you could just add those to your pile, and you could cut your charm squares in half and make different lengths also in between your bigger squares. So that was kind of neat. And finally, I don't know about you, but when I start making a quilt, lots of times I have pieces left. And sure enough, I had one quilt that was a wedding quilt, and it was so pretty. And when I got done, I still had some boxes left. And I said, well, these are about 8 inches wide, and I don't want to make a quilt strip that's 8 inches wide. You might, because then you'd have a lot of places for your quilting if you were going to machine quilt. But I thought, well, here, then you could take and cut these into the length that you'd want, width that you'd like it to be for your quilt, and use those pieces up, or use it in conjunction with some other pieces that you had. And there again, once I figured out what some of my strips were going to be in my colors, then I laid them on top of different fabrics, and I came up with this nice rust color, which looks red, but it's really a brownish rust. And just a reminder that for the bottom, when you get ready to do your backing, that if I'm using a 3-inch machine tape, adding machine tape, I have to add 1 inch to each side. So my strips are actually 5 inches wide. And then for my 2 1/4 paper strip pieces, then that would have been 4 1/4 wide. And that's for your backing part. Now my length, I decided I was going to make 58 inches long. So I made it 58 inches long, plus I added 1 inch on each end. Hopefully I could you just fold that up and let that be my binding on that end. That's just reminders for that. So now we're back at the quilt that I'm working on, and you can see all the work that it looks like has gone into it, but it was already done before when I was doing my paper piecing. One of the things that I did is that I marked one end of the quilt as the top, just with a marker or with a pen. And I always started at the top there, and you can see because I started there, I've got that nice edge going across there, and I'll probably be able to fold that under and make the binding for that end. And then the other end, if it doesn't work, you remember we just take and even it up and then put a new binding strip on the end of that. Now the one thing that I found about this one, doing it with these strips, that was different from the other one was that I seemed to have some more bulk. I had more bulk because of those seams. So to take care of that, I tried like a combination of things. And the first thing I did was, you're going to take and you're going to put your fabric together and you're going to have a 1-inch seam. Well, I tried stitching a little bit in the seam part, not too far, just a little bit. And that was helpful, but I also needed to either, when I was cutting my pieces to make them fit, I needed to either cut them like 1/8 of an inch less across once I had them, and that seemed to do a lot. But before you start cutting anything off, getting cut happy like I do, then take and try it and see, because depending on your seams, you might find that when you do that and you set this in there, that one and that it might fit really nicely, and it doesn't have to lay exactly flat because but that's pretty good. And the other thing that I did was when I'd start going to press these seams open, then I started taking my iron and folding this edge under before I ever got back to it. So now this one's ready, just what I was showing you there, and that one pops in there. And this has been a good one, so I'm going to keep going. I went ahead and I added a strip in the center of the backing material, and I just used, either you can use either your 2 1/4 or your 3-inch, whatever the width of your part is, because I'm not going to do any quilting on those colored parts, and so on these strips. So I said, well, now I've got a nice place where I can practice some of my free motion quilting, and I'll probably add another strip on there and another set. I've got enough to do that, but you can make it any size you want. Then I had just one little tip for the day, because the other day I thought about it as I was threading my machine, and I have my bobbins for my machines, and I take a black magic marker and I go over to the hole where the thread comes out, where you've got it when you get ready to start threading it, and on both sides I take and mark that. And one thing is I have an old machine and then I have the new machine, and so this helps me to know that this is my newer machine, but it also helps me to see that hole to stick that thread through there. And you say, well, that's not a really big thing, but if you're threading a bunch of bobbins for projects that you do, then it is a nice thing to have those. And then when I see them in the drawer, I know which machine they go to also. I hope this is helpful. I hope you come up with another great project. And if just for fun, give yourself one of those quilt as you go projects. This is Stephanie at Hightower Stitching.